Last time on Grasp, we got to follow Nicola's story on how it all started and how he built a grassroots think tank. If you've not yet heard the first episode, go back as it's the start of the whole movement. And in this episode, we're going abroad. To my hometown, Berlin. And we are bringing the foraus model with us. Nicola was convinced the model could also work abroad, and he was eager to test it. But the initial feedback wasn't, let's say, warm and encouraging. This German guy, for example, was listing a ton of reasons why it wouldn't work.
Because Germany is so different, it's more competitive, the access is not as easy as in Switzerland. There are a lot of other think tanks around. It's more hierarchical. They don't listen to students, like all these kind of assumptions that are maybe really obvious assumptions for Germans, but maybe not for foreigners.
This is Regula. As a Swiss, she was a foreigner in Berlin and was perhaps the perfect candidate to test such a think tank in a German context. She had been working with foraus in Switzerland, and she knew it well. But the timing was not right for Regula. She didn't feel like it. She was actually ready for a break. And that's what we'll uncover in this episode, how a voluntary model actually purely runs on the motivation of its people. This is Grasp, a podcast where we get to go behind the scenes of a think tank. My name is Jamila. I'm an intern at foraus. And this summer, I've been talking to people of the Open Think Tank Network, trying to grasp some of the challenges and, let's say, creative ways in which people make change happen. Today's episode, Stepping Abroad. I found out, actually, Regula had always played by the rules. She's a good student, gets good grades, and she identified the perfect school in Berlin for her master.
Then it is a private school, so it's costly. And I told myself, okay, if I get everything funded, I go. And luckily enough, I got everything funded. And half of the tuition I got for free from the school itself. They give financial support. And the other half I got from a Swiss foundation. And then I said, okay, let's go.
She's this down-to-earth, practical kind of person who knows exactly why she does things. As she enrolled in her master's program in public policy, she decided that for once in her life, she wouldn't pull extra jobs or do voluntary things next to her studies, like she usually has done. She realized it was time for her to enjoy herself, to live a little.
Just enjoying Tempelhof, the coffee shops, I think the normal student life that you can really, really enjoy in Berlin with all the bars and restaurants and clubs, and I think forget about the time and the schedule. And me and my boyfriend were making fun that sometimes we were late for the class that started at 12:15, you know. Yeah, so I think just the usual, but what you do, of course you party, but you also go to a lot of events, in some intellectual events, discussions, concerts.
But then after a year of all the sun and fun, it so happened that Nicola was coming for a job in Berlin for some months. And in the evenings, he would hang out with Regula. It was summer.
The evenings were really long and warm. And we were just drinking wine on my balcony, talking about politics and projects and interests. And we're just kind of exploring the idea. Could we bring foraus to Berlin? And and he, of course, as he always is, he was just very optimistic that, of course, it would work and we can do it and you can do it.
Actually, Regula is not somebody who needs a pitch. She is super motivated herself.
If you know Nicola, you know, he's not someone pressuring somebody. Obviously, he's very subtle. And
she didn't need my pitch at all.
for me, like the most important role of Nicola, for me personally, was like he told me that I could do it.
So they decided to meet up with 2 other guys in a beer garden and officially discuss the next steps.
We arranged a small meeting with just 4 people. We were all Swiss people who knew foraus in Berlin. Let's just do 2 kind of explorative meetings, co-creation meetings. And one was targeted at potential members of the think tank, and one was targeted at stakeholders of the think tank. If we realize in these meetings that the others are right, that there is no space for such an organization, that people would not be motivated to join, that the stakeholders tell us that there is no niche, no uniqueness that such a think tank could bring to the Berlin political scene, we could still stop the project. I think this really reduced the pressure on me.
It was a low-stakes test, but in order to do it, they first had to accomplish several organizational tasks.
Writing a concept and thinking it through and writing the invitation and organizing all the people that have a role in the workshop and the space and the material and everything you need for like two workshops in 2 days.
As she was digging into this, Regula realized,
okay, I'm actually the only one doing any work.
Tell me more about that.
For Nicola, it was clear like he wouldn't do like the nitty-gritty. He would provide me with contacts and names, and he would send out invites and stuff.
And that was all fine and good, but Regula needed more hands on deck to be able to pull off the 2 workshops.
The others maybe didn't believe as much in the project as I did, or I don't know. I just realized, okay, I'm pretty much alone organizing these 2 events.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? People need to be motivated in order to help out building these kinds of organizations, because the work is unpaid. You cannot really force or demand a volunteer to work.
I think it's never a good idea to pressure someone in a think tank you're building on voluntary work. So either the people, they start working with their own motivation, or they should drop out. Especially like if they don't have the initial motivation to chip in, then they should better leave immediately, because otherwise you waste your energy on them.
But there was another way which Regula knew of firsthand. That soft kind of influence that Nicola had instilled in her after their many discussions on the balcony. A way of inspiring a person to project by talking of ideas and connecting there, rather than focusing on the task needed to be done. So Regula started talking to a lot of people in her surroundings. She even chatted up her neighbor about the project.
It was funny, she didn't have a laundry machine. So she would do her laundry at our place. So whenever she did laundry, we had 1 hour to chat. And I told her about the project.
Some laundry hours later, her neighbor decided to join the team. When the day for the workshop was there, Regula was nervous. This was going to decide if this experiment was going to continue or die. So when the crowd gathered in the room, they started with somewhat of an unusual exercise. Regula went up to a whiteboard with a black marker in her hand, and she
put a dot on the whiteboard, and everybody had to say what he or she sees in that dot. We didn't want to come over as like the normal, very maybe serious think tank or old-fashioned think tank. For us, it was very, very important to always have little things that communicated to the participants that we are different.
And people seemed to think it was fun.
I just started, I think I said, I see a worm from the back. I think that's what I said. We just really random. And with that, everybody just joined in, and they had a lot of. I remember one that said she sees one eye of a smiley.
With smiles on people's faces, Regula and the team continued with some workshop exercises and pondered for what the equivalent of foraus could look like in Berlin.
We had different rooms with different papers on the tables. We tried to have these just really small, special activities to just activate maybe another part of the brain or relate in a different way to people, to also maybe bring them out of their comfort zone and activate them and show them that we want to try do things differently.
They were asking themselves important questions such as,
what would the think tank need to do that they would be motivated to participate? What would they like to do in a think tank? What resources could they bring? What network could they bring?
The feedback was good, and they even got a couple of new team members to join the group after that day.
2 or 3 people stayed and came back every week. Also Daniel, who at the beginning was a little bit more reluctant. So we went from like 2 people preparing or like doing most of the work for preparing the first 2 workshops to being like 4, 5 or 6 people organizing the next workshop. So it was a huge increase in man and woman power. So that was also a success.
And the next day, it was time for the stakeholder meeting.
Mostly with the goal to identify a niche in Berlin, to see what would be unique, where would we need to place the think tank, that it has like a space to grow, and also to see which are the stakeholders that we need to cooperate closely with.
The goal of this workshop was to include significant stakeholders as early as possible, so they would develop a sense of ownership to the think tank from the start.
What came out of the workshop was that indeed there was a niche for such a think tank.
So what is the niche, you ask?
The niche was really the grassroots organization of also a lot of younger minds and the political independence.
And it seemed like the fact that they were young and playful in their work and how they got their conclusions actually helped the team stand out and bring an additional value to the table.
We just realized that politicians, they loved to come to our events, just because it was a little bit different than the events they normally go to. I think most of the politicians are probably really, really bored with what the events they have to attend. And our events were interactive and challenging, and just young people with a lot of knowledge about the subject like came and discussed with the politicians their ideas, and so the politicians were really, really happy to come to us, even though that sometimes we organized an event that in our mindset was already quite traditional, but for them it was so exceptional. And when I realized that even if we do something that is really not that special and they're already that pleased, I realized, okay, it can be quite easy to impress them and to make them to come back and to engage with us, and that it is an asset to be young and just to do things a little bit different than all the others.
So the team decided to continue on their quest and establish a grassroots think tank in Berlin. They called it Police 180. They're still running successfully and are bringing innovation to the German think tank space. Do you think you managed to prove this German guy wrong?
In some ways, yes. So I think where I definitely proved him wrong is in terms of what we can achieve in terms of reputation. So I think Polis now has a really good reputation, really good access, and people they realize if you're like capable, if you have skills and knowledge, and they accept that and like that, and then it's okay if you're young. So I think in that way we could prove him wrong.
And maybe Regula proved herself to be wrong too.
So either the people, they start working with their own motivation, or they should drop out.
The lack of motivation Daniel had in the beginning wouldn't be an indication for his motivation going forward. He actually joined and is still active today, long after Regula has moved on from Police 180.
After he saw the success of the first 2 meetings, he was all in. And then he did a lot of work, tons of work. He's still doing a lot of work. I think he's the only funder still active in Berlin. And for him, it was probably just he had too much doubt, or maybe something else going on. I don't know, because I don't really know. I knew him at that time. There was some reason that he didn't engage in the first 2 months, but after these 2 events, he was all in.
My chat with Regula made me realize that maybe if someone is lacking motivation, perhaps all that is needed is a bit of patience and some new inspiration, and they'll come along eventually. At the end of the day, doesn't motivation come and go for all of us? Next time on Grasp? But what if no one is motivated to step up as a leader? How can you then build a movement? In London, the leadership position was filled in a quite unusual way, to say the least.
How to put that in words? It's like when you lose the ground under your feet. It's just like, oh shit, what happened? And yeah, and it's, I don't know. I mean, I had 2 options. One option is to go forward and say, actually, no, misunderstanding. Or I could give it a try.
That's what's up next time on Grasp. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Grasp. This podcast was possible thanks to the generous support of the Larix Foundation. I'm Jamila, your host of this show. Tinka Media is the podcast production house behind this episode. Music came from Blue Dot Sessions. From Foraus, the project is overseen by Edu, our digital innovation manager. What are you grasping for right now? If you're out there in the world and you want to join the movement, get in touch with us. We look forward to hear from you. See you in the next episode.